we're going to start with the whites, the Chardonnay at 2011. Tell me about what you're proud about this Chardonnay.
So I try to create and craft a Chardonnay that is, I would say, not your typical California Chardonnay. And it's not a typical French Chardonnay either. It's kind of where we like to think of the fact that there's three kind of styles. There's old world, there's new world, and then there's somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I like to play with my wines. So if you take a look at the Chardonnay, for instance, first of all, it was basically barely extracted in terms of yield. So the yield was about 100 gallons a ton, which is, you know,
wow,
very, very little. The wine was all fermented in a French barrel oak. Mm-hmm. And the style that I go for in a Chardonnay is not your big butterball alcohol fruit bomb.
Which is kind of traditional California Chardonnay.
Which is kind of traditional California. But by the same token, sometimes in France, in a cooler vintage, especially, you could have some wines that are very acidic and sometimes are, you know, unidimensional. So I kind of like to focus somewhere in the middle. So for instance, this wine will be very creamy, but will not be buttery.
Right.
So you will not be drinking popcorn, if you want to call it this way.
Which is nice because I feel like winemakers kind of got so far away from buttery that it got so crisp and so dry that then it wasn't traditional Chardonnay. So it's nice that you picked a middle ground.
Yeah. So I'll tell you how I go about this technique of making it very complex and have a lot of layers without getting the butteriness. So I like to give the analogy of milk. If you take milk and if you whip milk, what do you get? Cream.
Cream.
And if you whip cream, what do you get? It's butter. So the spectrum goes from milk to cream to butter. Nice. And the way it works here is when you ferment the actual wine, the white wine, in the barrel, the yeast falls down to the barrel, to the bottom of the barrel, and it's called lees. And there's a process in French called bâtonnage, where you stir the lees. So basically they go out and give you that incredible mouthfeel into the wine and incredible complexity as well. The more you stir, kind of like milk, the more you're going to get close to the spectrum of creaminess. But then if you overdo it with the oak, you're going to get very butteriness.
Interesting.
So I try to stay away from that by staying more into the creamy zone. I'm trying to have a wine that is very smooth, very creamy, very balanced, but yet has some of that complexity that is not overly dominated by the fruit and the oak.
Right.
Because once you get too much fruit and oak and alcohol, then you really no longer taste the varietal. All you taste is fruit and alcohol.
Now, I would just sip this and not even want food with it, but if you were going to pair it with the food, what would you want? So
this, for me, my favorite wine to have when I'm having fish at night, especially if I'm having a nice piece of fish that's been grilled, I love to have Chardonnay with it. That's usually a main white wine for a big meal that is seafood oriented.
Okay.
So that's what I would drink this with. But,
it's lovely.
Yeah, but then again, you could drink it with anything. It's lower on the alcohol, so it pairs very well with food. We're at 14.2% alcohol, so it's not going to take over the food.
Right.
Very balanced.
I call it the breakfast of champions. Cheers.
Cheers. See, the layers go on and still going. Even after 20 seconds, we're still having the finish not leave us. That's kind of what I'm after in terms of creating a wine that has a very long finish that creates a memory for you.